Black people make up the majority of the population of Brazil. A study conducted by the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, IBGE, in 2010 found that 7.6% of Brazilians consider themselves black, and 43.1% think they're mixed, or moreno. Despite the racist state's attempts to separate morenos from blacks, morenos are considered part of the black community. This is a larger percentage than half of the population, due to the fact that 43.1% plus 7.6% equals 50.7%. With 47.7% of the population, whites are Brazil's second largest ethnic group. But how did Portugal colonize Brazil and create such a large black population? In those days when Brazil was still a colony, why did the country have more black people than white people? Before we continue, please subscribe to this channel so that we can continue to create more content about the wonderful region of Latin America. Despite being sad and shameful, there is an easy answer to this question. Brazil had a large slave market during its colonial days, and even decades later. Millions of black people were kidnapped from Africa and brought to this country against their will to be treated as objects. The Portuguese enslaved Africans and brought them to Brazil for many reasons. A large number of native people were enslaved in the early days of colonization. The Portuguese, however, brought with them a host of deadly diseases they had already cured since they had lived with them for hundreds of years, but the native Brazilians had never encountered. Brazil's native population also did not peacefully accept Portuguese culture and laws. Despite having less technology than Portugal, they were more knowledgeable about Brazil's forests, territories, and weapons. Portuguese were unable to enslave the natives because they fought with all their strength against them. Millions of natives died because of the Portuguese, and most survivors were forced to abandon their culture and beliefs. Brazil is a huge country full of natural beauty. There was never a desire by Portugal to populate this territory, to turn it into a second Portugal. Back then, they saw Brazil as a place where they could earn money. As a result, Brazil suffered colonization. Slavery in Brazil began pretty early. Native Americans who survived the war and diseases were captured and enslaved. The bandeirantes, flag carriers, slavers, and explorers would explore the inner part of Brazil to discover new territories because it was such a lucrative market. They would also carry Portugal's flag, hence the name. In their exploration trips, they captured natives and enslaved them, selling them however they could. The native people's slavery was used for many things in Brazil, especially for cutting and selling Brazil wood. At that time, Europe was very fond of this beautiful tree with its redwood. Since Brazil wood was extremely expensive, Portugal earned a great deal of money from it. The trees were so majestic and important that Brazil was named after them. As the importation of enslaved Africans began in the 16th century, the situation unfortunately worsened. Indigenous people were never freed from slavery until slavery was considered a crime. The Portuguese kidnapped people from a wide variety of countries, particularly coastal countries, resulting in the enslavement of Africans. In the Atlantic slave trade era, when Africans were transported to America from their homes, Brazil imported more enslaved Africans than any other country in the world, including the United States. During this period, more than 5 million enslaved people were brought from Africa. Enslaved people were imported during the 16th century, but became popular during the 17th century when the gold rush started. Since gold was easy to find, many Portuguese bought enslaved people to find it for them. Enslaved people were prevented from stealing gold by Portuguese regulations, police, and laws. When it comes to plantations, enslaved people were used throughout every step of the process. Portugal gained even more wealth as a result of its cruelty. Brazilian slavery was, after all, the driving force behind many types of economic activity in the country. Brazil was the last country in the Western world to abolish enslavement because the Portuguese and Brazilians were so concerned with making money and producing products. As of May 13, 1888, slavery in Brazil was officially abolished. Nevertheless, By that time, over 5.8 million Africans had been enslaved in Brazil. It is estimated that approximately 40% of the total numbers of enslaved people were kidnapped from Africa and taken to the Americas. Enslaved people outnumbered white and dominant people in some cities. As a consequence of kidnapping the Africans from their homes and bringing them here to work all day while being tortured and hungry, the Portuguese colony of Brazil became mostly African. Despite racism still being prevalent, Brazil's black community is strong and fights for the space and benefits they deserve. There is so much to learn about Brazil, with it being the 5th largest country in the world. To learn more about Brazil and Latin America at large, please subscribe to our channel to help us grow. Our goal is to become one of the leading channels on sharing our love for the great region of Latin America.